So let me begin by saying that this is our second virtual panel discussion. This may become a habit with us. One thing about North Carolina is that it's so large, well, so long, that sometimes it's easier to do this, even though it would be nice to see us all in 3 dimensions rather than these flat little screens. But still, this is a nice alternative. We're going to have the speakers in the following order. We'll do it alphabetically. The panel list is Central Piedmont Community College first with Gloria Kelly and Aaron Alsop. Rowan Caveras Community College with Tim Hunter and Isabel Folk. By the way, Gloria Kelly is the Dean of Library Services at CPCC, and Aaron is the archivist. Tim Hunter is the Director of Library Services at Rowan Caveras. Isabel Folk, the other archivist. We have 2 of them in the community college system. It's wonderful. And she's also a cataloging services librarian. Finally, Surrey Community College, Dr. David Wright, Associate Dean of Learning Resources, and Sabrina Mabe, Reference Assistant, Genealogy and Archives. All right, so with that said, what I'll ask you all to do is, if you're not a panelist, please mute your microphones and stop your video, which I'm going to do right now here in a second. If you have questions, put them in the chat. If you have questions, put them in the chat and we will address them at the end of the session. Any questions at the moment before we shut ourselves down and listen to this wonderful presentation? If not, here we go.
Good morning, everyone. I think it may be my time to speak now. I'm Gloria Kelly from Central Piedmont in Charlotte, along with Aaron, and we serve as a team in making sure that archives is being heard at the college level. And the questions that were sent, we're just going to sort of talk through the process that we have at Central Piedmont. And one was to determine the strategy for getting the administration on board for having an archives. When I came to the college in 2008, Central Piedmont had a history room, archives room, and that had been started some time ago by the automotive instructor, college historian. So everywhere at CPC, everybody holds multiple jobs. It's not just a one-job function. So he really started the history room at the college, and he collected clippings and different types of publications. So we had something that we were working from. It was a one-room classroom when I came, and we had, at that time, someone that was a trained records management person that worked 1 day a week in archives, and that was all that was given to that area. We did not do any kind of active collecting whatsoever. So at that point when I came, I had an interest in archive, had worked for areas that had major archives, so I knew what it entailed, and I had taken coursework. So back in the days when everything was done by paper and pencil, so I had the actual how to process collections and all of that. So I had done that in the past. So I had an interest there. The president at the time was Dr. Tony Zeiss, and he was a historian. And so he loved history, and he worked with the Charlotte area community to develop history programming. And so once I realized that he was interested in that, I played on that, and not played on it, but I was interested in it as well. And so we worked with that, and out of that, we were able to hire a part-time person to work as an archivist, a trained archivist to work part-time. So I worked with that until probably a year in, and at that point I asked for a full-time position because we had won our place in his heart and in the college. CPC was going in 2013 to their 50th anniversary. So 2012, I was appointed as co-chairperson of the 50th anniversary committee for CPCC. So we had to use archive to develop some of that programming. So again, archives came and rose to the top and became a vital part in making sure that the college could celebrate its history. And so from that point, the wheels started turning. Our archivist left and went to UNC Charlotte. We advertised and Erin came aboard. And since then, it's been rock star. She's been going and making sure that things happen, keeping programming in the scheme of things. And so I'm going to let her take it over from there to say what she's doing presently in that area.
Sure, thank you. And thank you, Gloria, for the introduction. And for those who don't know, I'm Erin Alsop, the archivist for Central Piedmont. And I don't know if we should, I'm just going to jump in and take on some of the answers that I've shared, and at least to give you a background in how I got from where I've been to where I am now and where we're taking Central Piedmont Archives. I've been an archivist for about 10 years or so. Actually, my background was originally in secondary education history. So I've always had a love and a passion for history. But after the loss of my grandmother, I kind of hit rock bottom and I knew I needed a change in life. So I moved back home to New York to get a fresh start. And that's where I discovered the world of archives at Brooklyn College as part of the CUNY system. And through that, through my time at Brooklyn College and a variety of other jobs, such as the Greenwood Cemetery, the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, the Queens Public Library, Citibank, as well as a few others, this blend of experiences in corporate and educational and private and public institutions, really helped to mold and shape the way I think about archival work and advocacy at Central Piedmont. And because it's still such a new system, even though Gloria did give some background on how the collecting was started, that it was an automotive instructor named Raymond Mason, who, like me, like Gloria, like probably all of us on this call, loved history and saw the need to preserve it because nothing was being done about it. So even though, maybe he didn't have a whole army of people behind him with all this, scrapbooking that he's done over the years, but each one of us over the past 5 decades or so that have been involved working in the archives, we've done a really great job with making sure that not just preserving of content, but also the promotion of that content. And today it's really grown from, being this closet, like Gloria had mentioned, it was in a few different spots in the former Learning Resources Center on Central Campus. And now later this year, we'll be moving to a very large space dedicated specifically to archives. So I think one of the questions was, what are your successes? And I think just having a space in this new building alone is probably the biggest success thus far. The fact that the college administration and those involved in making those decisions with what would be included in the new building and what wouldn't, and the fact that they saw the need to have archives included in that, I think is a really, really powerful step forward. And it's something that I hope other community college archives will be able to experience moving forward. Gloria, I don't know if, did you want me to talk about other successes and things like that?
Yeah,
Okay.
You can continue.
Sure. So at least in terms of some challenges, that's always a good thing, because the reality of the archives program is while there are great successes, there's definitely challenges and failures along the way. The challenges are just the awareness of archives. It's still an ever-growing department. And getting the entire college to be aware that we exist is still a challenge, but it's a good challenge because we do have allies like with Gloria and other members of library services, as well as outside of the library, amongst faculty and staff and other employees that know, oh, maybe this would be good for archives, or, oh, I have a question, maybe archives can help answer it. So that change in thinking and the processes of thinking to include archives have changed over time through the work that Gloria and I have done. Some other challenges, and I know for all of us really, are just the processing of our backlog. We actually did receive support. So as of January, we have a new person in the archives department, and her name is Becky, and she has helped to, really, really help to sort through and organize this. So she actually told me the other day, there's never a lack of work to be done because there is just so much content and so many things to go through that, it's in one way, in a joking way, it's kind of job security because there's just so much history to sort through and weed through. But aside from that, It has been really exciting work, with the processing of our records, the digitizing of things, the curation of exhibits. Now I'm talking more a little bit about the daily work that we do, as well as researching and planning ways to incorporate the archives into instructional opportunities. Gloria, I can pause there if you want to go back and forth. I'm not really sure how to best, go from one question to the next.
Additionally, on the areas of success and failures on a dean level is, I consider one of our successes is to establish an archives program, to actually have a valid program. The hiring of full-time staff and now part-time staff. So that was one of the successes. Creating a space to accommodate the collection was also another success of ours. And as Erin said, we will have a new and improved space for archives with reading rooms, processing rooms, compact storage, things of that nature. We were also able to purchase software so that Erin, and we're moving into using Content DM this year. So we're able to do that. The area of collaborating with college areas like English, journalism, Erin has worked to include faculty to make sure that they have assignments that do with original work. Access to the president's office. With the changeover, Dr. Zeiss left, they hired a new president, and in that transition, we were able to work with his office to create and to maintain some of his digital files and sort of get them in the mind of collecting. So that helped the college to realize that the things that I collect are college materials and should be held on to and not discarded when you leave. So we were also able to coordinate with the HR and talent development areas so that when people left the college, Erin now is on the checklist so that she can reach out to those people to figure out what they have that could actually be transferred over to her. So those were some of the successes we had at that point. One of the major failures I consider in myself is that budget did not follow. Budget does not follow the archives. We are working based upon the library's budget. So she doesn't have a budget. So we try to support her, even though we consider this a college archives. And so we work in that manner. The challenge is to bring all employees on board. The longer an employee has been with the college, more materials they have that belongs to the college. And sometimes they don't realize the value of the information that they collect, whether it's meeting notes or agendas or programs that they've held, accreditation reports, things like that. They don't really consider it having lasting value, but from an archive standpoint, that is valuable materials that they should hold on to. So that's one of the challenges, to continuously tell them, do not shred everything that you think is not of value to you. Some things are of value to the college. And then to the ability to access electronic documents from administration. Everything is, they may think that they're really wanting to know what I wrote every day, and that's really not the process of archives. It's collecting and looking at those things to see whether it has lasting value to those around us. And CPC is a value within the Charlotte community. We have campuses all over the county. We were the main source of workplace development. And that was our thing, is that we train workers to work in the Charlotte and in the areas. And so there's a lot that we have to offer to the Charlotte community. And if we're not collecting our own history, nobody else is collecting it for us. And so we're making sure that we collect it so that we have a prominent place in the Charlotte history as well. So we're working with that. And then I think some of the challenges to work with ITS to realize that I think they have a policy that they strip people's emails after a certain number of years. So if everything is electronic, no one is writing letters, no one is keeping paper copies of anything, electronic is our form, our choice for collecting. So we have to really continue to work with ITS and says that does not work on the archives point of view of getting rid of everything that after a certain number of years. So that's some of the challenges that we've had in that area of doing things. One of the other questions, and I'll answer this and then go back to Erin so that she can answer it on her point of view, is what advice would you give for those trying to attempt to establish an archives collection? My first point is, don't try to reinvent the wheel. There are other people that are doing what you want to do, so just let them and reach out to them, and which we've done that in many ways. Visit other archives. I think visiting each other, visiting other archives that we aim to grow to would be a good example. Determine the support you have on your particular campus. There are people that support the idea of having an archives and retaining things of that. And we started with, I think the other thing is starting in areas that you know have a certain kindred spirit with you, like history, English, graphic design, those kinds of areas that want to study history and what has been done in the past. So if you establish that connection with them, then they will be more apt to use you and be an advocate for you. Then determine what your needs are, whether it's space needs, staffing needs, or financial needs, trying to work on that and figure out how to get it. And then how do you fit into the college mission and vision? You know, with our new president, it's all built on that. If you don't fit there, then you're not there, you know, so we try to make sure that we fit where we're supposed to fit in that. And then take advantage of every opportunity. As I said, when the door opens, you have to be ready to walk in. So sometimes you have to prepare a long time before it actually materializes. And I think that's what we've been working on, is that we're ready. Whenever it comes, we're ready. And so now we have a new space and we're ready. So, and I've learned that if you figure out people's interest and you figure out how archives fits in that interest, especially those that make decisions, financial decisions, that sometimes you can easily walk in that door and there's not a question about how you fit and where you fit. Erin, you want to go further?
Yes, that was so well said. And the one answer I included for that question was to be patient with the process and find your allies. And very much so that's happened for us. And I will say that, you know, a lot of the successes that we're, you know, experiencing and relishing in now were because of the work of those done before us. And so to honor that past work from past library and actually even current library employees who have helped out in archives over the years, as well as people who are no longer with the college, you know, I've found, you know, a strong allyship you know, within the library services team, as well as outside of the library, through the use of images in social media, for example, working with our marketing department to help promote the history in a variety of ways. Say graduation's coming up, you know, what's the history of our graduation ceremonies? Have they always been in a traditional way, or have they not been in a traditional way? And how can we incorporate, you know, certain history, always comparing it then to now? And for us, that's been a really big success, because we're able to show and have evidence to provide, to say, wow, we've done this before, or we've maybe not in the same way as we're doing now, but it's something that we attempted years ago. And how amazing is it that we can still reflect back? I know that's not always the situation for our other community colleges in the system, but I hope that this presentation will be a source of inspiration for those who, you know, may be questioning why they have certain things, or if there's a space in someone's library that they're wanting to get rid of or take over because all of the historical files are, say, in that closet or something. You know, don't discard it. Find a different place for it. Find a place where it can be utilized and accessed. But I also think that a lot of those decisions can easily be, you know, be better made with a more clarified state of mind if, you know, the system office, for example, had greater support of the history of the system and history of programs. You know, so if this directive from the top down, you know, we're coming, you know, I guess we're evident in that way. You know, I think we would be having much richer conversations at this point, but at the same time, everything happens as it needs to. You know, some of Gloria's answers tied in nicely to another question about, you know, what goals and plans for the archives do we have moving forward? And it really was a three-pronged approach. Student use. So one major goal is working with our library instruction team to incorporate the practices of archival research skills. So how to read a finding aid, how to navigate an archive database, how to access different types of primary sources that tend to be outside of a traditional library database or library catalog, and incorporate these into instructional sessions. And with that, you know, you need to have buy-in from faculty. And that's very difficult sometimes, because with a community college, it's a very, you know, short time frame, 2 years or maybe one semester, whatever it may be. You know, so trying to find a way that we can incorporate it easily enough where not a lot of changes can be, need to be made. So having, an easy insertion into the current syllabus or course assignments. Another goal is employee use. So inviting, employees, faculty, staff to the archives. Granted, I know in COVID times that's a little difficult, but having a presence both online and in person for people to come and access the files that we're processing and maintaining, and really peeling back the layers of history. College Senate is one big example and one big collection that Becky and I are currently working on. We have the whole history of College Senate, which was also known as Faculty Senate years ago, that document the processes that faculty went through to get to where they are today. And to be able to reflect back upon that, to use that evidence, for whatever reason moving forward, that's something we hope to use, and to continue using archival materials for PR campaigns, college anniversaries, program anniversaries, whatever it may be, but as well as public use. So, one failure of mine was the start of something called the Charlotte Community Connections. And it was a grant that we were hoping to apply for that collaborated all Charlotte area libraries, archives, and museums to put our content in one place, whether that was, a history pin mapping website or a WordPress database, website database, whatever it may have been. Either way, just getting all of the local resources together in one place and promoting that for student use, community use, instruction use, whatever it may be. So these are, big plans that we're still in the process of building towards and working towards, but I know that in good time, we will be able to achieve those goals.
So I think we'll turn it over to the next group.
Thank you so much, Gloria and Aaron. Then next we have Tim Hunter and Isabel Falk.
Good morning, everybody. So with ours, I wish I could say that it was, it's a more utilitarian approach to have that we had gotten ours to get to started. I started with the college in 2011. And when I started, our archive consisted of a bunch of boxes all piled together, a filing cabinet in an 8x8 room that was really meant to be, I think, a study room, a group study room. So when we got here, it was all disorganized. I think there had been, and I'm not positive about this, I think there had been an attempt early on before my days and Rodney's days that was here before me, to organize an archive, and it fell short, and it ended up with that pile of stuff in the 8x8 room. So it sat there for a while. It just wasn't a priority. We didn't have the time. We didn't have the staff. And then finally, we hired a part-time person that was one of our reference librarians, and she had an interest in that. And so she sort of went through it and organized it to some extent. And that was the beginning of an organized, really, archive. I think in the past, for a while, they were doing the thing where they were clipping the news articles and all that kind of stuff. And then it fell to the side, wasn't getting done, and things changed. Everything moved, to more electronic type records and things like that. So she organized it a little bit for us, and it sat there. Well, we've got a new academic vice president, and really this is sort of what led to the interest in it, and we played off of it. A couple events. One, we discontinued our media services department, which left a really vacant, empty space in the back that would be great for an archive, expanding it, organizing it, and utilizing it. So the other instance was too that because the media services, we had the additional space that we hadn't had before. But then the academic vice president came on, and he was really wanting, for him, it wasn't so much about the archives, where it was more for archives for us. But he wanted a place for a SACS type library where all the SACS materials from the years could be located in a central location from the college and everything be collected. So with that idea, we went with it. I actually used the visiting librarian program from the state library. They came in and helped us do a study and gave us some advice on the space and where we should go with that. And then at that point, I was able to, once I became director, I was able to convince the administration based on the SACs that, hey, we need an archivist librarian to do this. If this is something you really want to do, we need someone who specializes in this that can devote their time to it. And so that's sort of how we got our position. They were all aboard with that. The other thing that had happened too was because that space was vacant at levels above us, they had decided to take that space, and their idea of an archive was all these records that everybody didn't have room for. They were just going to drop them off in this space and dump them and put them in a big pile. So that also motivated me to say, hey, okay, we want to be part of this, but we're not going to be a space where people can just come in and dump anything they want in no organizational way. So another tactic that we took was, okay, we have the archive, we're going to do this. We were sort of, I don't want to say forced, but it was recommended that we take on more of a record storage aspect as well. So we had to come up with a policy to where we could organize those certain records that not necessarily would have archival purposes, but we could have an organized storage area as well. So those things could be retrieved when needed. We would organize that in such a way that we would be able to dispose of those records based on retention schedules and things like that. So that was really a play for me to keep that space and also utilize it as an archive space. So essentially our archive ended up with three functions, really. It was going to be the archive, that record storage for some of the college, and then the SACS library, if that's what you want to call it. So that's sort of where we went. We didn't really focus on the historical aspect of the county and going any broader than the college, because we have a very good history room and things at Rowan County Public Library. And for the local communities, there's several things, but that wasn't going to be our primary focus. Those things might come around as we got organized, but those were things we were not going to do. So it was mainly going to be strictly the college's archives. So that's sort of how I made the play to get a full-time archivist, and we did that. And Isabel came on board in September of 19. Is that correct, or 20?
September of 2019.
2019. And so I'm very happy to have Isabel with us. We also have a full-time tech position that I've been working on trying to get to be Isabel's assistant. And so that we can handle all that and do that. And that's another phase. So I tried not to fool Isabel when she came on. When we hired her, we really were starting from the ground up. And I wanted her to be clear that that's where we were at. So that was sort of what we had and where we were headed. And some of that was directed, some of that was some of our own advice to try to get support for the archive. So that's really how we got the archive collections started. So Isabel, you want to tell them sort of like what we've done since we've gotten you and what far we've gotten?
Yes, I have a PowerPoint. So if you want me to just run through my whole PowerPoint.
That'd be fine, Isabel. You should have screen sharing privileges. So yeah, bring it on.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, I'm Isabel Folk. I'm the archivist at Rowan Cabarrus Community College. I am also sometimes the cataloging services librarian. I haven't really been that for a while because we've been away. So my main priorities these days have been being an archivist. But I got my master's in library and information science from the University of Denver in Colorado, and I graduated in 2018. And from 2016 to 2019, I actually worked in DU's Special Collections and Archives department. So I was a member of the processing team, and then in about 2018, I got sort of unofficially promoted to be the senior member of the processing team. So I was in charge of training everybody else who was coming on. I interned at the Colorado State Archives. I took on a lot of project archivist positions sort of at the same time because my processing team position was not full-time. So I was project archivist for a lot of different people around Denver, including the History Colorado Museum. I was the assistant curator for the personal papers for one of Colorado's previous governors for a few months as we tried to sort of get all of his papers under control. And then, like Tim and I mentioned, I started at Rowan-Cabarrus in about September of 2019, very beginning of September of 2019. So I was only at Rowan for about 6 months before the pandemic hit and shut everything down. So we did start right at the very beginning of an archive. It was, I mean, I walked into the space and things were in boxes and I had an Excel inventory spreadsheet, but that was about it. that was where we started. And then of course the pandemic came and shut everything down, and it's very difficult to be a physical processing archivist when you cannot physically access your archive. But this is kind of what our archive space looks like right now, except this picture is actually slightly out of date. I took this picture last week, but it's slightly out of date because that massive pile of furniture in the middle that has caution tape wrapped around it is no longer there. They have removed that out of the archive, which is very exciting. So that was exciting. So this is the old media services room. It's right outside of where the library offices are on our North Campus. So my desk is just right outside the doors of the archive. So it's really nice for ease of use. It is a very large room, which is great. We do have some rolling shelves, which is perfect for how much we have right now. But as our archive expands, we're going to try to get more shelving. Hopefully, eventually they'll let us get more shelving. So that's kind of what the workspace is. It's not climate controlled, but we do have a temperature gauge that we regularly check and record the temperature on, so we can kind of get an idea of what our temperature fluctuation I can't say that word, look like, just to kind of, keep an eye on things. So it is not a perfect archive space by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a very good archive space, and it's certainly a step up from the 8x8 group study room that it all used to be in. And there's plenty of space to work, and we do have a little digitization station in here with lots of power and its own dedicated light and all of that. So it is a very good space. My day-to-day, so this is a picture of where I keep the boxes I'm working on in my home office, which I'm only on campus 1 day a week these days. So this is all of the boxes that I've been working on just piled on a couch in my home office. So I'm still working my way slowly through the stuff that was here when I got here. It was inventoried and it was organized, but I still go through everything, rehouse and refolder if it needs it. Am I getting any chats that are important? Okay. I just start entering in metadata. So we have archive space. We got that probably 6 months ago. And I have been adding collections to it as I go. I think we have about eight or nine collections in there right now. only some of which are fully completed because I hop around in between the different collections just based on what box I've pulled off the shelf that day. And I have gotten a few donations, a few accessions. So I go through those when my eyes start crossing with metadata, I switch over to working on the donations that are coming in. Tim mentioned that we really only focus on the institution as a whole. The one exception we've kind of made to that is the Cannon Mills collection. Of course, Cannon Mills was a big industry in Kannapolis, which is where one of our campuses is located. And we don't have a lot. I've got some books and a few other things from Cannon Mills when Cannon Mills went out of business in, I think, 2004. So I've got some of that, but it is related to Rowan Cabarrus because when the textile mill shut down, we did do a lot of re-education and retraining for the mill workers that were suddenly out of work. So that was a big thing for us. So it's related, but tangentially, it's pretty much the one exception we've made. My big success that I have just been crowing to everybody about as soon as I get the chance is our digitization station. So we got a great scanner, which we had to fight for a little bit because of the pandemic. You know, no college wants to spend a lot of money right now, and it wasn't a lot of money, but we still did have to go to them and say, hey, you know, we really do need this, and we really would like this if you guys would sign off on this. So that was really awesome that we have a great scanner now and a station set up, and we're going to get started on that just as soon as we can get people to start coming back. Like Aaron mentioned, one of our big challenges is getting the word out to people about what we're doing. And again, since we are such a young archive, we've really only been around for about a year and a half. Not a lot of people know about us. So we've really been pushing, you know, who we are, what we're doing. Another success that I had was the registrar's office and the academic programs office had a bunch of catalogs, and they emailed me and they said, do you want these? And so I arranged to go pick them up, and they said, oh, we've got a bunch that have markings on them. I'm sure you don't want those. We'll just throw those away. And I said, no, you don't understand. The markings are actually really important because it shows how things were changing as they were changing. And I got really excited because, oh, not only are these catalogs, but these are catalogs that actually have like active markings on them. And then they got really excited because this thing that they thought was useless and that they were going to get rid of actually isn't, and it made them look at them in a different way. So that was me getting excited as an archivist, made them get really excited about what they were giving me. And then the failure, not really a failure, more of a ongoing kind of thing, like Tim mentioned. They haven't really decided if I'm a records manager yet. They're still working on that. The answer was originally yes, and then it was no, and now it's maybe. And of course, they've had lots of other things on their minds. So we haven't gotten an official response on whether or not I'm actually a records manager on top of being an archivist. I do still have records that a records manager would have, but they haven't decided whether or not I'm actually keeping them yet. So it's not really a failure. It's more of a kind of an ongoing thing, and those happen, and you just kind of gotta be patient. Maybe bring it up every now and again. Say, hey, you know, have you guys made a decision on this? But some things just take longer to figure out than other things. One of the questions I answered was, have you ever gotten the question of why do you keep physical copies? Why not just digitize everything? I haven't gotten that question yet here, but I have gotten that question before at other places I've worked. And my response is always the archival concept of locks which is LOCKSS, lots of copies, keep stuff safe. It's literally what it stands for. It's like the funniest acronym. But digital doesn't mean forever. Your software can get corrupted, your hardware can go obsolete before anybody has a chance to update it. You could have just like a critical failure and lose everything, and you still have the physical copies as long as you've kept them. And you can always redigitize. In the same vein, if you have a bunch of physical stuff and your archive burns down or floods or gets destroyed in a tornado, which knock on wood will never happen, or if there's theft or something like that, you have the digital copies to help replace what you have lost or what has been damaged. Digitization always takes longer than you think it will. I have been digitizing stuff for a long time, and it always takes longer than I think it's going to. And you have to think about, you know, how much storage do you have for your digital objects? Because, you know, if you're the Smithsonian or Library of Congress, you probably have a pretty big budget to buy lots and lots and lots of storage space. If you're a small community college, you probably don't have the budget to buy lots and lots of storage space. So you kind of have to figure out, what are my priorities? What do I want to digitize? How much room do I have to digitize the things I want to digitize? And you also have to consider time, resource management. Do I have the staff for this? Do I have the money? Do I have the time to do this? And you kind of have to balance all of those different priorities. Last thing, my advice for attention, visibility, and usage. We put out, the Rowan-Cabarrus Community College Library puts out a newsletter, I think it's 3 times a year, 4 times a year?
3 times a year.
3 times a year. Okay. I was pretty sure it was 3. And I have started writing what I call Archives Corner. And it's literally just an update. It's like, hey, here's what I've got. Or here's something cool I found in the archive. Just kind of, you know, keeping it in people's minds of what I have, what I've been doing, and that I even exist. If your library does library orientations for students, you can ask to have the archives included in that library orientation. Start conversations with your faculty. What do they want to see in the archive? What do they want to use? What do they need in their classes that perhaps you could work the archives into? I've had some faculty ask me about oral histories. Think about physical or digital exhibits, whatever you have the time or the space to provide. If you have a website or a web page, we also have a research guide, LibGuide for the archives itself. And I mean, these exhibits certainly do not need to be large. They can be, you know, a few pieces or a couple of photographs, but just to kind of show off, here are the things that I have available. And the last thing I would recommend is, like Tim mentioned, what do we need to actually have for accreditation purposes? So one of the things we're required to have is hard copies of all of our catalogs. So that was one of the big pushes that I did almost immediately, as you know, when I got here, was who's got our catalogs? Where can I find them? We had some already. And then of course, you know, the registrar and the academic programs have been great in getting me all of the rest of the copies. So that was one of the things we had to consider too, was what do we actually need to have for accreditation purposes? And that's also a really good starting point for conversations with administration, with faculty, and with staff. Say, hey, you know, we need to have this anyway. We've got an archive. Can I have that stuff? And also, is there anything else you would like to donate to the archive on top of all this other stuff? And that's my presentation.
Thank you.
Just a couple things too to add on Isabel's to wind it up. Gloria mentioned this, and I would have to say is budgets. We didn't get any extra budget other than them hiring Isabel. So we've had to carve out money for all these things that we've done out of the library budget. So, you know, we had to carve out money for the archive space. We had to solicit money for our scanner. And luckily, the pandemic paid off in this round because our academic programs had extra money because they weren't spending all this money on travel and things that they typically do. So I was able to get my VP to help fund that scanner. So it's a constant battle for us to locate funds to do things outside of or to cut that slice out of an existing library budget to do those things. So, and it's definitely worth it. Don't mind doing it, but it is something that you have to think about as far as a budget. The other thing too is one of the things that helped us get Isabel as a position was that, she'll tell you in a normal world, she has to do other things. There's multitasking and that takes away time from the archive position, but it was one way that we were able to do that. So, she spends time on our reference desk. She teaches classes, regular instruction classes. So it had to be sort of a jack of all trades for all of us that are in community colleges. You know how that goes. You're going to have to do a little bit of everything. And I hope that actually has been a good experience for Isabel, because that way she's gotten exposed more to other things in other areas. But
Yeah, definitely.
that was one way. Yeah, that was one thing, that we had to do to get the position. And finally, there was one other thing, we had the same situation. We had the 50th anniversary of the college a while back. And I think some of the administration realized too that a lot of this stuff has disappeared. The community colleges really have not done a good job collecting their history. And they, a lot of this stuff has just disappeared. And when they had this 50th anniversary, they went to go look for a lot of this stuff and nobody could find it. So that was another thing that sort of prompted some of this support that we've got recently. And so, but we're definitely glad. We're glad we've got Isabel. I think we've made a lot of strides in the last probably year and a half. And I would encourage you to do the same.
Thank you so much, Tim and Elizabeth. Isabel. Ignore me. I'm a little, I haven't had enough coffee yet.
It happens more often than you'd think, actually.
Oh, well, then maybe I'm not in the minority. Well, that leaves us with, last but not least, David Wright and Sabrina Mabe from Surrey. So take it away, folks.
All right, good morning. There's been some similar threads here to what's been discussed at this point. And I think one of the things that I can say at the outset is you have to kind of start where you are and what you're in your unique situation, because all of us have unique situations. And when I came to Surrey back in 2006, we had a few things. I remember that there were a couple of notebooks sitting out on a shelf outside my office. We had a collection of scrapbooks of newspaper clippings. Unfortunately, those newspaper clippings did not have dates on them for many, many, many years. So, that was not a good thing. I kind of just cringed when I realized that, being a librarian and always wanting to document everything. But we had Digital NC. That was one of the first projects that we had a partnership with them to digitize those scrapbooks. For one thing, they were such a large format, and so we did have them digitize those, and that was great because, as we all know, actual newspaper clippings we now photocopy, but back in the day that was not done, and so they were getting a little bit tattered, even just being in scrapbooks. So we were happy for that partnership. But one of the things I think that we did have some file drawers and some files because of our genealogy genealogy collection that, of course, bordered a little bit on local history and things like that. So there were materials, but they really weren't organized in a good way, in a usable way. And then shortly after I came, we hired Sabrina, and her background had been in archives at the Wake Forest University School of Medicine. And she has her degree in public history from App State, her graduate degree. And so when she came on board, immediately we started talking about what needs to be done and try to do some organizing. And of course, she had the skills and knew what to do. I came from a large institution in Mississippi that was very old, founded in 1830. And we had struggled because there were just very few things that related to archives, and we didn't have even a part-time position, nor did I have anyone interested in really building the archives. And it was kind of a add-on to a person's position that was funded outside the institution. And so it really was not, and I realized the value of archives. I've always had an interest in history and trying to preserve history. So it was just kind of a convergence really when we started ours, but it did help that we had the local history collection. One of the things that has happened, and I'm gonna let Sabrina talk for a little bit, but one of the things that did happen that was a little bit of a disappointment was our dream for archive space. Suddenly one Friday afternoon, administrators came in, and I knew nothing about it, but they met upstairs, and all of a sudden we were told, oh, by the way, we're creating a writing center. So the genealogy collection was being moved to where we were going to have our archive space. And the archive space, just all of a sudden we had a closet, essentially, is where we are. It's an organized closet, mind you, but it is a closet essentially. And we know there's a finite amount of room. So we have been hesitant in some respects to take materials. We've tried to, because we have that finite amount of room, and I don't know where we'll go from there when we outgrow that. We do have a storage room that we've used in our digital history project, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but we do have a few places that we could put more things, but it's a very big challenge. And when that space we were not consulted at all. It was an executive decision, and all of a sudden we were without a lot of space that we had planned on. And so, we would like to think that we could have more space at some point in time, but I don't know where that will be. Sabrina, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about from your perspective.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Just to piggyback off what Dr. Wright said, we had a huge room for an archives. We had subject files. We lost it. I think in the past year, like you said, we've got some more space. It's been hard to watch your space go, but we do have a large genealogy room. And I think part of our success has been working with the genealogy group because they're sort of a powerhouse in the community. One of our challenges, I think, is lack of money for supplies, and Dr. Wright's been really good about getting grants and stuff for that. But we've also, I think one of our failures is we have a hard time getting the administration on board, and we've changed leadership so often. And coming from Wake Forest, where we had lots of money and we had 2 archivist positions there. I did work as an archivist there. Here, we can't get anybody interested in making what I do an official position, which is, I think, one of our failures. But I do want to speak to my daily work as an archivist. Like some of you said, you wear all kinds of hats. I also do interlibrary loan, sit on the reference desk, and I'm also digitizing, and Dr. Wright will talk about our digital heritage project in a little bit. But I kind of wanted to speak to those of you that want to start an archives, to the daily work, to the nuts and bolts of it. And I know Isabel and Aaron, this is, old hat to them, but I guess I'm old school. But when we receive a collection, usually, sometimes it's genealogy, sometimes it's for archives, but I have to treat some of it the same way. But usually it needs to be gotten in some kind of order. We've got 25 cubic feet of a lady's materials that was stored in notebooks, and she smoked. So the entire collection smelled like smoke and all of it was yellowed. So the first thing I do is try to get all that into acid-free folders, acid-free boxes. And I told Peggy I was going to do show and tell. So here's some of the boxes we use, acid-free. You get all these supplies from Gaylord. I try to get photos in the polyethylene sleeves. And I love the document cases, Hollinger and labels. So try to get everything stabilized. But like I said, I'm not a full-time archivist here. So try to do an inventory, at least an inventory, and get that. I think the next step would be finding aids, and I have those on our website. And we eventually do want to digitize some of our collection. I have a mission statement. I think this is something that everybody should do, your mission statement and your collection policy. Do that first so you know what you're about. The next thing you want to try to do is, one of the questions was your ideal archives collection, and I put every collection processed, digitized, and online finding aids made available, and every department on campus using their retention schedules and donating their materials. I do want to say too that since we've started this, we do have all of our catalogs. We have every student handbook since 1965, 64. We have student newspaper called the Squire's Voice, and I have finding aids for this. We have sports scrapbooks. I think our main problem is getting the departments interested in what we're doing. So I think we probably need to be better about doing that. But like I said, not a full-time job, and I am involved with the scanning right now. Can't think of anything else. Dr. Wright, you want to talk about our scanning program?
Yeah, and I want to say a couple things because of course we were also asked about what our successes, failures, challenges are, and I think that Sabrina has hit on some of those because of her unofficial position as archivist here. It's not been that I haven't tried, but
He has. He's really tried.
We have new administration kind of in the works above me, and so maybe there'll be a chance to make another case for at least having that as part of her title, which would really help, I think, because it helps raise the visibility when you actually have a title, even if it's added on to 3 other things that the person does, you know, it really can it raises some visibility. I think the other thing we've tried really hard to solicit materials back in the beginning. We also used a traveling archivist program, and it was very helpful because they were very, we were doing a lot of things the right way, but they kind of helped expand our horizons a little bit as to things we should be doing and could be doing. And we did some outreach at that time, but like Sabrina said, we've had over the years, since I've been here, we've had quite a few changes in presidents. And so it's difficult because you have to do, it's continual outreach, and you have to really work hard. And we have funded supplies out of the library budget, but we've also asked our foundation for money when we had a specific need. So we've gotten several $100s to buy supplies. Supplies are not cheap because they're pretty much, you got to order them from Gaylord or University Products, and either one of them is pretty expensive because they've got a corner on the market for archival materials. You can't go to Office Depot or you can't just go pick them off the shelf. You just kind of tell people, hey, these are specialized supplies and this is how much they cost. I told Sabrina this year we had a little money in our supply account, and I said, let's order. So we've just recently ordered some more materials, and that's kind of how we've had to do this. And that's because of a collection we got in, which really more fits in the genealogy area, but they needed supplies too. So we kind of go back and forth with that. One of the things I wanted to talk about is our history project, and really part of probably the success of our history project is because we had this genealogy collection. One of our former deans, Carlos Surratt, he was very active in the genealogy society here in the county. And so he really, the room is named after him, and he really was instrumental in getting this off the ground and in really making it well known in the community. And it really is the largest genealogy collection in this region. We have people come from really all over to use it pre-pandemic, and we've started on a limited basis letting people back in. You know, that was a kind of a basis for our local history project. And so we have not digitized a lot of our archives as part of that. However, there will be, I'm sure, once we run out of grant funds with that project, there'll be some push, and Sabrina's in a good position to do that because she knows all about and when we don't have grant funded scanner positions anymore, she can work on scanning some archival materials. Because we've tried to go with thematic kind of things for our grants for our local history project, we haven't really felt comfortable, you know, incorporating the archives into that because it's really related to Surrey Community College per se. So we've tried to stay within the confines of our grant. However, we have here and there digitized a few materials from our archives. And we will, once the grant funds run out, we've applied for our 4th year grant. So we'll find out June 3rd if we have that or not. And but beyond that, we don't know what's going to happen. So we'll see. We would like to digitize more in that collection, but as has been mentioned, it's a process. And we are using the Omeka software for our project, and we recently did a large upgrade from that in December to the Omeka S from the Classic. And you know, that is, we really have a lot of space. However, we do have backup. We have cloud backup too, which is expensive. And so we can accommodate some of our archives into that project, and as time goes by. Our local history project, I think, probably is a little bit unique in that none of the partners that we have, and we have a good number of partners in our group, and I'll try to be brief on that because I know we need to get to some questions, but with the local history societies, the Surrey County Historical Society had done some work in Past Perfect, and they have some photographs out on the web through Past Perfect. But the museum really didn't have money to do a digital history project, and so we've been grant funded from the get-go, and we had a consultant come in, and that was our first year, our planning grant, and so that was very, very helpful. But because of our partnership, it really is truly a community-based digital history project. And we're running neck and neck here. I keep telling people we're going to pass up Watauga and being the largest county history project in the state. We're neck and neck as far as number of items in our collection, so digital collection. So, but I'm really proud of what we've done up to this point. And there's a lot of, you know, you can always look at areas you could have improved on, but when you're operating on a shoestring and grants, you know, I think we've done a lot here. And I think that the Digital History Project has really raised the visibility in our community and our county. I keep hearing of people, you know, that they'll say, oh yeah, I heard about that. I wish I had a marketing person for the project because we could do a lot more. Unfortunately, you know, it's one of the hats that we wear is just part of that project. So,
and we thank Gloria and Aaron for helping with that. We started
to get off the ground with Omeka. She'd had some experience with that, so that was helpful. We had her come up here, and Gloria let her come away for a day, and that was helpful when we first started into this. And you know, I think that, you know, now that we have really a bona fide archives, albeit a, you know, large closet essentially, I really think the college has understood that the importance of it. I can't say what a future administrator would do, I think if you can get one started, start somewhere is what I would say. Start with what you have. It's going to be probably people wearing multiple hats, but at least start to organize. And if you have a few things, just organize them because it is helpful. And then start out and I've tried to also use the records management, even though I don't want to we don't have a place for it, but that angle too, to raise administrators' sites about, hey, we really need to be, preserving some of this according to state records management guidelines. And so any way you can, any hook you can to get your administration on board is a good thing. And other people have mentioned other things. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Peggy or whoever else is in charge of the meeting. Thanks.
I'm just the moderator, David. I'm not in charge. We don't have a lot of questions per se. We have people saying thank you so very much, and I add my thanks to that. Let's see here.
Peggy, I did not let Erin share her photographs. Erin, would you like to share?
Erin, bring him on, darling. You have to unmute.
Sure, sorry. So I will say, so the theme of wearing multiple hats is really rings true, especially with what I'm about to show you. Because of the multiple hats, I didn't really have a chance to put this in a more formalized PowerPoint. Hold on, let me get this. So it's just a series of screenshots. So please forgive the crudeness of how this will be displayed. Let me just share my screen with you here. Share screen. Okay, can you all see that?
Not yet. Oh, there we go.
Okay, so it's definitely small because I literally just sent screenshots to myself. So this is the original space in the old LRC. You can see the curved wall here. So this was, and Gloria, correct me if I'm wrong, but so it was a two-sided space. So this side was, I think, part classroom or part stacks area at some point. This is how it was set up when I came in 2016. But before that, it was in a series of spaces. It's always been within the same building, but it tended to move kind of from place to place. Just give me 1 second here. I got to move this. All right. So then I'll just scroll through here again, just the other side of that room, showing processing. Just, I wanted to show the chaos or the madness, the organized chaos. This is what I really meant to say. And just kind of giving you, and for those who are unaware of archival work, this is, really what it's about. It's kind of sorting through the files that have just been, dumped into the office over time. Again, this was our old stack space. So, movable shelving that they had moved from other spots in the library that held older books that were moved or discarded over time. So we kind of inherited those. This is when we were packing up. So we had to pack up all of our resources. I'd say maybe more than half of our collection is now currently in offsite storage while we're in this temporary space, because the temporary space was too small to accommodate all of these things. So now this is the temporary space. You can see that, there's some more process boxes and the Gaylord bankers boxes, things of that nature. We hung things up on the wall to get things up off the floor. Granted, it's still not a perfect place, a perfect science, because as a lot of construction was happening on our campus at the time, there were literally, you can see right here, this was taken out of the floor, out of the ground of a building that was coming down. So we have so many plaques and portraits and trophies and all this sort of stuff that fortunately has not been discarded. But, we had to dumpster dive. There was a point where my colleague, Jonathan, he called me and said, hey, a building's coming down and there are files in this building, come and get them. So we did. There were videos from our PBS affiliate station, WTVI, where it was all past recording. Sorry, I know this photo doesn't explain what I'm talking about. This is the new office space that we'll occupy. Gloria, I did not include blueprints, so forgive me. Again, me in the temporary space coming back during COVID time. So there was a version with the mask. Thumbs up ready to go, all excited. And then, okay, so that was the slide, but yeah, that's all I have. So I'll stop sharing here. But in any event, you know, it's definitely not, it's not a perfect science, right? But we're all doing the best that we can with what we have, whether it's minimal budget, minimal resources, minimal staff, you know, and even just doing what we can every day to get the word out, whether it's, you know, connecting with faculty or connecting to a class or just randomly emailing someone to say, hey, look at what I found. Could this be of use in your instructional session? Or sending it to, you know, I mean, I've been told that I'm kind of fortune favors the bold, right? So there have been times where I've emailed the president and said, oh, look at what I found, a message from a past president. I feel like you would find inspiration in this. And, you know, whether I think I got a response back, I don't really remember, but the fact that, you know, making these efforts to have connections and to inspire people in the same ways that I, you know, really enjoy archival work and understanding the voices of our past has really helped us to think about our collection development policies in a different way. You know, historically, it's been, you know, the voices of administration and things like that that have tended to be included in the record. And now a lot of what we're doing is, you know, we're trying to find ways to diversify our records. So, you know, having different voices and other voices that commonly wouldn't be included in the official record, and giving those that opportunity to have, you know, to be preserved in the archives, you know, whether it's a student project, you know, Gloria mentioned that we've worked with journalism and English classes, you know, using student assignments to use archives as a way to answer some of the research questions that they have, or even to help create, you know, some archival records, whether it's through interviews or oral history projects. Another project is the Charlotte Racial Justice Consortium. So using our archival sources to understand the racial history of our institution. I don't know if she's on this call, but my colleague Mariko has helped out a lot. She also works at Johnson & Wales. So that's one of the other institutions involved in this project. And it's been really exciting to see the student interest, you know, in archives. And they, more times than not, they say, wow, I never knew this existed. This is wonderful. How can I see more? How can I find out more? You know, but we use Google Drive for a lot of things because we don't have a database yet. We're still working on that, but, you know, we're providing research efforts through Google Drive. It's not a common way to do it, right? But I think, you know, the common theme here is we're all trying to just use what we have and use it to the best of our abilities in ways that conform to archival and library standards. But, you know, again, wearing these multiple hats to just get involved in different areas so that we can promote within. I'll pause there, just in case there's time. I know we're almost up at time, so I'll pause there for questions. Thanks.
Let me look at a couple of these. I had a suggestion. David, I think you mentioned that when you first got there were all of these newspaper clippings that had no dates on them. Was that right?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, in my former life as a newspaper reporter, I was pretty familiar with my local newspapers, what we call morgue files. So sometimes if you're looking, especially if it's a small community, well, small, Asheville small, and they've got a local newspaper that's been around long enough, certainly longer than your community college, they will have things grouped not just by date, but also by topic. So, you know, it's a little time consuming, but it's one way to possibly date some of those things.
Yeah, one of the problems we had is that all of our regional, when the local community newspapers have been bought out by, you know, a group, and then there's been subsequent buyouts of that group, and so we have been it's been very difficult because a lot of the a lot of the paper records were just dumped. And when in those buyouts, they would come in and just clean out files and just dump them. And so that was very sad because, you know, in part of our local history project, we've been trying to locate photographs, you know, which normally you would go to the newspaper and you could find, but, you know, we've gotten a few because we've gotten some photographers that used to work for the newspaper or things like that. So it's been really tough because of, in a small community, all these local newspapers now are owned by a bigger corporation somewhere. And so that's.
We do have the Mount Airy News on microfilm from 1896 to 2011. We're lucky with that regard.
You are.
Yeah.
Of course, having a microfilm reader is another thing entirely.
Yeah.
We have one of those. It's old, but we have one.
Let's see if I've got oh, well, David had a question for all of us in general. He wants to know what discussions have taken place in your library or on your campus about preserving the digital records from your institutions.
Can I jump in and answer that? Because
Absolutely.
once I saw that, thank you for asking that, David, because I think part of that answer relates to not just archival records, but the records management side of things as well. So for those who don't know, Central Piedmont was hit with a ransomware attack in February, and we lost access to systems. There was records that were lost. And for 2 years, Gloria and I have, or 2 years prior, but really since I started in 2016, there was always a question of, what are we going to do with digital records? How do we preserve digital content? And again, with the advent of asking these questions years ago, and now with the ransomware attack, it was almost like, okay, well, what do we do now that we've lost records, right? Do we have a plan in place? And I mean, I think because it's still such a newer topic, it's very hard to have the conversations, because it involves not just libraries, not just archives. It involves, across the college, IT, marketing, all the records that are, all the departments that generate records of permanent nature need to be at this conversation, need to be at the table talking about what can we do to ensure that our born digital records, what we call born digital, so Word documents, PDFs, things like that. How can we ensure that how can we ensure that they're able to be accessed over time, but accessed in ways that are viewable then as they are now, right? So, one answer is there's really not a perfect answer. There are tons of programs out there. Preservica is one thing, but looking to the state archives, I think is probably the Digital Heritage Center is another option as well, even though they are more of the historic records arm of the thing, of the topic at hand. But at the same time, I think we've had discussions, they haven't really gone anywhere, but I think with the advent of the ransomware attack, this topic has come up more. And it's been, granted, we don't have seats at the table, right? So sometimes, like Gloria said, once the door opens, you have to be prepared to walk in. And whether that's walking in with a chair, with your own chair to bring to the table, or walking in to sit down at a chair that's provided for you, we haven't had that opportunity yet. But I think that this is really an important topic to discuss, and something that I think should involve not just all of our community college archives, but something that the system office should take into consideration, because ransomware attacks can happen at any time. I mean, I think 3 other community colleges were affected by that, right? So again, like I said, I don't have a perfect answer, but it is something that we've been talking about in recent months because of what we've experienced.
Well, actually, Erin, I'm so sorry for that horrible experience at your campus, but all of us could look at this as a thin edge of the wedge to get awareness on our campuses as well. Tammy Stewart says that they've been backing up all of their scanning on 5 terabyte hard drives, external ones. And sometimes, just a physical thing that you can offload large amounts of information to, or that's better than nothing for sure.
Yeah, that was what we decided to do here at Rowan Cabarrus as well, was just a simple physical hard drive is just a backup, just in case anything ever happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but one of our challenges has been our dialogue with our ITS department. They see everything differently than what we see it. Even us trying to get a hard drive was painful because they think their response was, we don't buy hard drives. We encourage you to put everything in the cloud.
Yeah.
And so, and I hate to say it, I went out and bought a hard drive for myself. I bought it, and and gave it to her. That's the only way we could get it.
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes that's
it's,
what it takes.
yeah, it's just that relationship. They just see everything differently than, and it's like you said, this ransomware thing might be an opportunity to use and talk to them and say, okay, hey, look what happened to CPCC. We need a combined plan, a combined effort to make sure we don't lose this stuff. So.
And like Isabel had mentioned, the locks concept, lots of copies keep stuff safe, and, educating other areas to think in that way. But I also think as archivists and librarians, it's important for us to also think like ITS, so what languages are they using? How can we understand their point of view? And I think that's the only way for a plan like this to work. It coming together and all having the discussions, but if we're not speaking the same language, the conversation really isn't going to go anywhere. And I will say, I don't think we suffered a severe amount of records loss. I know from the archive side of things, we've been backing up things in Google Drive and external hard drives and a separate server that's backed up and managed by ITS. So fortunately, our historical records were not impacted, but more of the retention type records, I think that is what was impacted. Again, I didn't ask what was lost. It was something that
They wouldn't have told you anything. They wouldn't have told you anyway, Erin.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they would have, but again, I just wanted the dust to settle before saying,
Yeah.
well, what did we lose? So I mean, through the grapevine, I've just heard like, oh, well, we're missing this, we're missing that, missing pieces, and and just thinking of ways to, I mean, and even asking the question, do we have a digital preservation plan? If you don't know what a digital preservation plan is, here's information to explain what that process is like and why it's important. I mean, thinking of all the records that our institutions generate now, it's all digital images, videos, publications, whatever it may be. And we can't print everything out and put it in a box. That's just not the nature of archival work. What we do is to preserve records as they are now, so that future generations can access and use them in the ways that we're using it now. Zoom calls, are they going to be able to view this Zoom, recording years from now to understand? I mean, I don't know. And that's part of the issue too, is that the digital records change and evolve so quickly, and they evolve too quickly to the point where we can't even create a preservation practice, like how we do with paper and news clippings and things like that. It's a perfect / imperfect science. And yeah, Mariko mentioned common language is important, right? And sometimes it takes serious situations like this, like a ransomware attack or data loss, to bring this topic up to the forefront. So, I mean, I'm very sorry that it happened to us, but at the same time, I think it's, shown a glaring light on some disparities within, with the understanding and purpose of archives.
There are a couple of kind of specific questions. One was mine. And what I asked was, Sabrina, could you share your mission statement with us? Because
Yes,
you're right.
yeah.
We absolutely, everybody wants to see it online first, but you've got to sort of decide what it is you're going to be doing. So
Right.
for those of us who don't have one, that would be an excellent thing. Let's see, what was the other one? Oh, and when I read this, I sympathized. Sabrina said, what do you do with portraits the college no longer wants to exhibit? We
Yeah,
have
I
one
noticed that
about,
in Erin's pictures,
yeah.
Oh, well, these were portraits of, so they were commissioned by the foundation,
Right.
and they were portraits of gentlemen, really, because there were no females included in this, but they were portraits of men that whose buildings were named after them. So that's,
Right.
that tended to
We
be.
have several of those in our
Yeah.
archives closet, and I'm not sure what to do with them. They're just sitting in the floor. Do I take them apart, put them in something? What? I mean,
Well, I would just leave
I don't
them
think
as
they'll
is.
ever be hung again.
Yeah, I would leave them as is, especially with, I mean, I've left them. We do have an arts department that, and gallery specialists who are trained in dismantling artwork and handling artwork. That is not my background. I can handle it as delicately as
Well, I'm
possible.
not sure these are that valuable or, would,
Oh,
you know.
well, maybe it's worth asking, like finding out who commissioned them, because they were commissioned by the foundation. That is money provided by the college. So that was our decision to keep these for perpetuity. Because it granted, we didn't have documentation stating that, yes, the foundation paid X amount of dollars for these portraits to be commissioned, but through the grapevine, that's what we heard. And that's why we decided to keep them. But a lot of the names and a lot of the people who these buildings were named after, they're still very much active in the Charlotte community. So that was another reason why we decided to keep them. But we have a lot. We have 30 of them or more.
We don't have that many.
Plus plaques.
Maybe
plus,
5.
Wow.
yeah, it's a lot. I mean, the whole space is, it's just littered with, I didn't include it in the pictures, I'm sorry, but we do have portraits kind of just lined up all throughout the walls away from the windows, because we have an ant issue right now. So,
Okay.
as the warmer months come, the Orkin man has to come every 6 weeks, something like that. Gloria and Janice, they get the email ants as the subject title, and they just know to call the Orchid man, but in any event,
It's better than silverfish anyway.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, not,
those.
thank goodness. But yeah, I mean, if you can hold on to them, I would, but we can talk more offline if you have specific
Well,
concerns.
and speaking of ants, we have a murder hornet in here right now. That's why I've been looking around. So I hope it doesn't. I'm kidding. He's just a big one.
One last thing, Jenny, if we could make a note of this, Julie Humphrey asked if preserving institutional digital records could be a topic for a future meeting or sessions. And I think,
Yep, I've got it written down. I think that's a great idea.
yeah, so do I. Well,
And
folks,
if we could find somebody that had that discussion on their campus or with a president on board, it would be really, really good to. I mean, I think it's kind of a political thing, but I think there has to be some leadership, which this is another political statement we don't often get from the central office. But this is a thing that I think people need to be aware of, and people need to. We need to be able to raise the issue on our campus more, in the appropriate ways, because as Tim said, it's very hard sometimes to get the IT people. They're focused on what they do. They're certainly not focused on institutional archiving things and the importance of it. So, yeah.
David's right. This is something that's got to be driven from the state office for it to really make a change.
I actually was very fortunate in that part of my title is that I'm the systems librarian. So I work with IT and I like them, and I bake them cookies and stuff. We have a pretty good rapport. And one of these guys called me before pre-COVID-19, and he said, we were looking at this stuff, and it occurs to me that we need to be talking to you guys, meaning the library, about the institutional records. And I periodically email him to remind him of that. I mean, he's like everybody else, he's doing 12 things at once, but that line of communication has begun. So I'd suggest, if you don't have good relations with your IT department, do something they like, go visit them. I sometimes think they live in darkened caves somewhere, but most of the ones that I know are pretty nice.
Bake them cookies.
Yeah.
One thing I
Making friends and allies in different departments is always useful. Always a good use of your time.
And it will take time. I think time is definitely the important factor here, is that, like I had said at the beginning, a lot of our successes at Central Piedmont were from tons of other people that came before us, library personnel that, who spent an hour or 2 hours a week to just sort and sift through and develop timelines, develop all sorts of things, and then taking that and bringing it to the 21st century by connecting it with other areas and other programs. With ITS, one thing I shared with them as a way to find common ground was the Internet Archive. So the archive essentially of the internet, and saying, oh, look how cool this is. And there's a few folks that said, this is amazing. I never knew that this existed. This is cool. What is Central Piedmont doing? So, you know, the question came out naturally when you're able to find common ground. And sometimes that common ground is things that don't relate to the college history. It's something outside of that, whether it's like, you know, a food archive or some blog that someone wrote about, I don't know, the archive of floppy disks. I don't know what the topic could be, but yeah, just finding things that are related or even unrelated to your institution could help spark some interest down the line.
Well, folks, I mark it as 11:30. This has been so informative. Again, thank you all. We so appreciate the fact that you're giving your time and your research skills and your knowledge to us about this. And with this, I'm going to stop the recording and